Communication isn't the problem. You're doing it wrong. And that might sound a little harsh at first, but if you think about it deeply, most relationship issues, misunderstandings, arguments, emotional distance, and even breakups don't happen because people don't talk. They happen because people talk, but they don't communicate in a way that creates understanding. There is a huge difference between talking and communicating. Talking is just the exchange of words. Communication is the exchange of understanding. And most people never realize that they are speaking a lot, explaining a lot, even arguing a lot, but still not being understood. That is why relationships become frustrating. You keep saying things, but the other person hears something different. You try to explain yourself, but somehow it gets misinterpreted. You express your feelings, but instead of closeness, it creates distance. And then you start believing the problem is communication. But the truth is deeper. The problem is not communication itself. The problem is how you are communicating. Because communication is not just what you say. It is how you say it, when you say it, what emotional state you are in, what the other person is feeling while listening, and how both of your attachment patterns are interacting at that moment. Let's go deeper. Most people think communication means expressing everything honestly and clearly. And yes, honesty is important, but honesty without emotional awareness can still fail. You can say the right thing in the wrong tone, at the wrong time, in the wrong emotional environment, and it will still create conflict. For example, imagine someone is already emotionally overwhelmed. They are stressed, sensitive, and mentally exhausted. And you go to them and say something very logical like, "You are overreacting." Technically, it might be true from your perspective, but emotionally, it will feel like invalidation. And instead of solving the problem, it creates a new one. Because communication is not just logic exchange, it is emotional interpretation. And emotional interpretation is not always accurate. It is influenced by mood, past experiences, insecurities, and expectations. That's why two people can hear the same sentence and feel completely different emotions. Now, let's talk about another major issue. People communicate to defend, not to understand. Most conversations in relationships are not actually conversations. They are silent battles. Each person is trying to prove their point, defend their behavior, or win the argument. But in this process, nobody is actually listening. And when nobody listens, communication becomes noise. Real communication starts when you shift from, "How do I prove my point?" to, "How do I make the other person feel understood?" Because understanding is more powerful than being right. But most people don't do this. Instead, they react emotionally while communicating. And emotional communication is often reactive, not thoughtful. For example, when someone feels hurt, they immediately respond with anger. When someone feels ignored, they respond with blame. When someone feels misunderstood, they respond with frustration. So instead of solving the problem, emotions take control of the conversation. And when emotions take control, communication breaks down. Now let's go deeper into something very important: timing. Even the best communication fails if the timing is wrong. If someone is not in the right emotional state, they will not process your words correctly. You might say something with good intention, but if the other person is already stressed or defensive, they will interpret it negatively. That is why timing is not just important, it is critical. Sometimes silence is better communication than words. Sometimes waiting creates better understanding than explaining immediately. And sometimes giving space allows emotions to settle so that real communication can happen later. But most people don't wait. They rush to explain. They rush to fix. They rush to clarify. And in that rush, they make things worse. Now let's talk about a deeper psychological issue: assumptions. A lot of communication problems are not caused by what is said, but by what is assumed. You say something simple. The other person assumes a hidden meaning. You express a feeling. They assume an attack. They respond based on their assumption, not your actual words. And suddenly, a simple conversation turns into conflict. Assumptions are dangerous because they feel real to the person making them. Even if they are completely wrong, they create emotional reactions as if they are true. That is why clear communication requires not just speaking clearly, but also checking assumptions. Now let's talk about listening. Real listening is extremely rare. Most people don't listen to understand, they listen to respond. While the other person is speaking, they are already preparing their reply in their mind. They are thinking about how to defend themselves, how to explain their side, or how to correct the other person. So even though physically they are listening, mentally they are not present. And when someone is not fully present, communication loses depth. Because communication is not just words passing between two people, it is emotional presence between two minds. Now let's go deeper into emotional expression. Many people struggle in communication because they do not express their emotions clearly. They expect the other person to understand what they feel without saying it properly. But mind reading does not exist in real relationships. If you feel hurt, you need to say, "I felt hurt when this happened," instead of acting distant or cold. If you feel ignored, you need to express it instead of giving silent treatment. If you feel confused, you need to ask instead of assuming. Because indirect communication creates confusion, not clarity. But many people use indirect communication because they fear confrontation. So instead of expressing clearly, they hint, they withdraw, they become silent, or they act differently. And the other person has to guess what went wrong. And guessing always leads to misunderstanding. Now let's talk about another hidden issue: emotional tone. Sometimes it is not what you say, it is how you say it. The same sentence can feel caring or insulting depending on tone. For example, "I am fine" can mean I am actually fine. Or it can mean I am upset but don't want to talk. But the tone changes everything. This is why communication is not just verbal. It is emotional and nonverbal. Body language, facial expression, timing, and energy all contribute to meaning. Now let's go deeper into attachment styles again because they directly affect communication. An anxious person communicates with urgency. They want clarity immediately. They want reassurance. They may repeat questions or express emotions intensely. An avoidant person communicates with distance. They may shut down, withdraw, or avoid emotional conversations. So when these two styles interact, communication becomes complicated. One wants more communication, the other wants less. One wants closeness, the other wants space. And both think the other is the problem. But the real problem is not communication itself. It is emotional mismatch in communication styles. Now let's talk about something very important: emotional safety. Healthy communication only happens when both people feel safe. Safe to express. Safe to disagree. Safe to be honest without fear of punishment or rejection. When emotional safety is missing, communication becomes filtered. People start hiding truth, avoiding topics, or adjusting their words to avoid conflict. And when truth is filtered, connection weakens, because real communication requires honesty without fear. Now let's understand why most communication advice fails. Because people are told to just talk more, express yourself, or communicate openly. But they are not taught emotional intelligence behind communication. Communication is not just expression. It is regulation, timing, empathy, listening, interpretation, and emotional awareness all working together. That's why two people can talk all day and still feel misunderstood, and two people can say very little and still feel deeply connected. Because connection is not about quantity of words, it is about quality of understanding. Now let's come to the biggest truth. Most communication problems are not communication problems at all. They are emotional problems. They are ego problems. They are fear problems: fear of rejection, fear of misunderstanding, fear of vulnerability, fear of being wrong. And when fear enters communication, clarity leaves. So the real solution is not to talk more. The real solution is to understand more. Understand yourself. Understand the other person. Understand emotional timing. Understand tone. Understand triggers. Understand patterns. Because when understanding increases, communication automatically improves. And when communication improves, relationships stop feeling like battles and start feeling like connection again. At the end, communication is not about perfect words. It is about imperfect people trying to understand each other in a better way. And once you realize that, you stop trying to win conversations and start trying to understand them. Because in real relationships, the goal is never to win. The goal is to connect.